Well, for more insight on the verdict and other pending cases against the three now guilty men is attorney and NewsNation legal contributor Angela Cenedella. First, Angela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Angela, are you surprised by the timing on this? This was only day 2 of jury deliberations.
It was a very complicated case with a lot of complex legal issues, so I am surprised it came quickly. At the same time, Thanksgiving is tomorrow, so it makes sense that, they would rush things along a bit, but deliberately. They were super thoughtful. I don't think anything was truly rushed, but I think they were aware of deadlines.
All right, so Angela, all 3 men found guilty of felony murder. Only Travis McMichael, the one who shot the fatal bullets, was found guilty of malice murder. So can you explain the difference for us and why that jury would opt not to find all of them guilty of that most serious charge?
Yes, well, they could have found all of them guilty, and that's what the prosecution was arguing in saying that they all were a party to this crime. But there is a difference between malice murder and felony murder. Malice murder requires either an intent to murder, an intent to kill, or just an intent that's so strong in the mind that you have a malignant heart and that you decide to kill. So that is a stronger standard. Now, Travis McMichael is the only one who actually pulled the trigger, so it makes sense that the jury would find him guilty there. Felony murder is different, and if you note that there's 4 felonies that they were charged with, plus 4 counts of felony murder, they all match up. So in the case of William Roddy Bryan, he was only considered guilty for 3 of those felonies, and thus also 3 of the felony murder charges. And then Greg McMichael was found guilty of all the felonies, plus all those felony murders. Felony murder is when you commit a murder in the course of committing a felony, even if you didn't intend for that murder to happen.
Okay, so Angela, here's a portion I think might be surprising. So they all now face a minimum sentence of life in prison, but the judge can determine whether or not they're eligible for parole. Is that right?
Yes, and that's normal. So judges are generally the ones who determine sentencing. So juries are responsible for the verdict, and then judges determine sentencing.
Okay, all right. So now the defense team for all 3 of the men has said that they will appeal. What are the odds that this verdict could change?
I think the appeal process in this case will not be in the defense's favor. As we all know, the prosecution did an amazing job through the entire trial and really tried to be careful to not provide grounds for appeals. That said, defense attorneys always do go forth with appeals anyway, but I don't think they'll be successful. And I think it's also interesting the prosecution stayed away from really bringing race in as a motive. That is something that could have provided grounds for an appeal, being overly prejudicial, but the prosecution was very careful here because she knew that based on the facts alone, these men could be found guilty, which they were.
Which they were. So, Angela, you mentioned race being a motive. Now, we just heard Tom, tell us all 3 men also indicted on felony hate crime charges. So, being that they face a minimum of life in prison, would they then face additional penalties?
They can because of the appeals process, etc. So this is a concept called dual sovereignty, which not all people understand. But if you live somewhere, you are forced to abide by the laws both of the state and also of the whole country. So they can be tried in different ways in different courts and actually sent to different prisons for those crimes based off of which jurisdiction they are a part of. So the federal hate crimes laws are interesting, and actually it's unusual for the DOJ to go forth and push this hate crime before the state trial has even been completed. But I believe that's an indication of how strong they believe their evidence is and how convinced they are of their case.
All right, so Angela, we have time for one more question. I want to ask you, the racial makeup of this jury really played such a pivotal role. It's a big talking point ahead of the verdict here. Predominantly white, only 1 black juror, when that county's population about 30% black. Can you talk about that? I mean, obviously we still had guilty verdicts across the board here, but a lot of people were focusing on that jury makeup.
And it makes sense that people would focus on it because a jury is supposed to be of your peers. And when you take a look at the percentage makeup of that area, it's 25-27% African American. So you would hope that that would be reflected in the jury. That said, the whole jury process is meant to take out all bias, to make sure that those people there, regardless of their race, are unbiased. In this case, we don't know what their true biases are, but we know that they all agreed across the board that all 3 defendants were guilty, and thus all will be behind bars for life.
Yeah, I mean, we did hear that defense lawyer saying after the verdict came in that they respect the jury and the court process. So, legal analyst Angela Cenedella, we appreciate you as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click on the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.